president is proposing higher tax rates and more loopholes, more complexity to the tax code, which is contrary to this bipartisan consensus that we're seeing evolve in this country. There are Democrats who agree with us. Lower tax rates, broaden the base for economic growth, and that's what we're proposing.
That was Congressman Paul Ryan, the pride of Janesville, Wisconsin, talking to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday earlier this week about his budget plan that calls for a very substantial tax overhaul, basically creating two tax rates in America of 10% and 25%. This is Power Play. Welcome back, Internet. And we should offer a hearty welcome back to Chuck Rocha, who was, I don't know whether you wanted to come back after the last time, but I'm glad you were willing to take a chance.
I'm glad to be back, brother.
Okay, he's rolling the dice. We dig it. And Ford O'Connell, you know him well, Internet. You follow him on Twitter. He doesn't wear socks with his suits. He's a pretty big deal. You know, that's how he rolls, Chuck. But he can't help it. So the question, gentlemen, is this. So there will not be a budget this year. Under no circumstance is the Congress of the United States going to pass a budget. It will not happen. And hasn't happened for a number of years. You have divided government, and it's just not there. So these are political documents. The president put forward a platform, essentially a platform, an economic platform for the future. Paul Ryan has one. The House is voting on Ryan's today. Do these votes for the president's bill, for Ryan, for president's budget, against the president's budget, for or against Ryan, do these things really have consequences? Chuck, let's start with you.
I think that the key will be that each party has a philosophy on how to get or to solve the problems of America. Right. And there's two different paths that's been proposed. And I think how they're really going to be used in our world is in politics. You're going to see TV commercials. You're going to see people using pieces of the Ryan plan. You're going to see the Republicans using pieces of the Obama plan to orchestrate those on TV in a way that they think will move the electorate. Right. And not all the electorate, but just that electorate in the middle that's going to be the ones who determine who controls the Senate and probably who's going to win the White House.
You know, I actually have to agree with you because I think both parties just want to say that they did all they could do. Right. Because eventually, you know...
You mean did all they could do to make their opponent look bad?
Well, that's exactly right. And it's really unfortunate the American people lose out here. But, you know, at some point, until we sort of, you know, get a handle on the tax code, growth in this country is not going to, you know, happen. And we're going to be back to where we are, you know, in 2013 unless somebody steps forward and actually offers a solution to our spending problem.
Now, I wouldn't usually have to point this out, Internet, given all of the, given what we do here, but given this comity that we see between the two gentlemen, I now have to point out that Ford is a Republican and Chuck is a Democrat. We're not used to this kind of agreement. I bet, though, that I can get you guys, I can cleave this bond with this question for the Ryan budget specifically that's going to be voted on today, which includes some very bold ideas, a major overhaul of the tax code, a flattening of the tax code, and turning the Medicare system into essentially a voucher program that he has another word for. I don't know what he calls it, but it's basically giving seniors a voucher with which to buy private insurance. So can Democrats successfully use this to defeat House Republicans because the House Republicans are going to vote for it? Chuck?
Absolutely. We've done this with the last Ryan budget that he proposed 2 years ago. I mean, anytime you start talking about senior citizens back to the voting, these people vote. They voted last time for John McCain. The year before that, they voted for the Democrats. We will say that any kind of cuts, any kind of meddling with the Medicare system will hurt your benefits. You don't want to put it in the hands of private. We want to keep it in the hands of the government so you have a secure response every time and that you know what you're getting for your return.
That sounds, he makes a lot of sense.
He's going to do a New York 26 on a national basis. He's going to try to throw grandma off the cliff. He's going to tell us that we're crazy. We don't need to cut. We're not about actually balancing the budget.
Ford talks about New York 26, he's talking about a special election that took place in New York in which a Republican-leaning district fell to a Democrat in part because of this message.
Exactly. And what we're going to do is we're going to say if we don't stop the bleeding now, America's basically on the path to destruction. And Paul Ryan has put forth some bold solutions, particularly in the tax code, because if we don't get a handle on the tax code, we're going to kill small business. And if we kill small business, there's going to be no growth in the U.S. So there's a lot of ideas in there that we need to push forward, but we need to be very smart about how we message it, because right now, unfortunately, messaging is winning elections, not actual ideas.
Well, here's so we agree that this is a consequential thing, even though not consequential in terms of how the government spends its money. You guys both agree that this is politically a consequential moment today.
Oh, yes? Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So we got that. We're back in agreement. We're back in agreement. Now, I want to move on to another topic. That is what's going on with energy in America today. There's two things. There's one is a very practical concern, which is that on the 31st, at the midnight of April 1st, the current legislation that funds highway transportation and authorizes an 18.7 a gallon national federal gas tax expires, and it's kaput, and they will have to start laying off people at the Treasury Department, and it's so you have this immediate practical concern. Then you also have what the president's talking about here, and this is a political concern. Who has the right argument, Republicans or Democrats, when it comes to saying what we do about the high energy prices that America is experiencing right now? And it's not just gas, it's electricity, and it's other things that Americans are experiencing, and it's really putting a bite onto the voters that both sides want. So I want to start with the larger question with you, Chuck, and that's the president is trying something really tough on this. He's trying to re-educate the electorate while persuading them and saying, it's not my fault.
Right.
It's a 40-year problem, and we need to fix it long term. And he came out today with some very harsh language about Exxon and the oil companies, trying to set them up. Do you think he can pull this off?
The concern is that every day when somebody goes to the gas pump, every time they go to the gas pump, they see what the price is. So the president has to be in front of this to go, over my tenure, we have an all of the above strategy. And while he's been a president, it's important for him to make the case that domestic consumption, domestic output of oil in the U.S. is up 18%. And also there's been investment in green technologies and all of the above strategy to go, I'm trying to do all I can do. But he's got to make a direct impact to the voters, because every day when somebody fills up their gas tank, that's when he has to do the dual strategy of persuade, educate, because at the end of the day, he's the president and people will look to him for solutions.
Almost $80 old power play paid to fuel up the old war wagon. And I definitely noticed when I was doing that. Ford, on the question of what happens in the House, basically we're now down to some small scale fighting over this. Will we extend the transportation bill? Looks like we're going to extend it, but this is the best case scenario now is a 3-month extension of this legislation that if it sunsets causes huge problems. What's going to happen?
You know, the president is in real trouble on gas prices. And right now, he says he has an all-of-the-above approach, and it's not an all-of-the-above approach. There's several things he can do if he wants to win an election with respect to gas prices. He's basically pivoted his whole re-election bid on an economic recovery. And if gas prices stay at $4 or more for several months, he's going to lose that economic recovery. There's a couple of things he can do, and it's going to put him real crosswise with environmentalists. And namely, what he can do is he can actually get rid of suspend the U.S. Merchant Marine Act of 1920.
Whoa, hold on. All right. As soon as they go to the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, we know it's time to take a break. We will let you talk more about that, Ford, and we will see if we can get you to answer the question about the legislation in Congress. We will do all that if you guys are willing to stay with us, because when we come back on the other side of this, U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley from the great state of Iowa is going to be here, and we're going to talk about the Fast and Furious investigation, so stick around. And Internet, you know what you think about Fast and Furious? Well, you already know because it's you, but you don't like it. That's the broad sense of the chat today, is that Fast and Furious, you are skeptical of Fast and Furious, and your skepticism is duly noted. But I want to close out on this. We're running out of time, but since we have these estimable guests here, I want to first of all give Ford 15 seconds in which to explain the Maritime Act of 1920.
Bottom line is we have an act in place that only allows foreign tankers to deliver foreign oil to one American port at a time. If we suspend that act and they can deliver it to multiple ports, it'll bring the cost down of oil. Bottom line is, in the cost of oil, we lose about $1.50 in transportation costs and refining. Those are things the president can control, and he can control them at least to win an election. Not going to solve the energy crisis, but it's going to help you win an election. Okay, now will you answer the question about what's going to happen in Congress with this transportation bill? I have no idea.
Chuck, I suspected that's what it was, that underneath. That's what it was. But now we know about the Maritime Act. Chuck, now, we were talking in the break just for a second. Basically, for the president, he's got to do energy price. It's very clear, even in the midst of a big consequential week where he's facing other challenges internationally on the healthcare law, you can tell energy is first and foremost in his mind. So there's two all of the aboves, right? There's an all of the above solar, biofuels, but then there's also the all of the above any political effort that he can make to try to, whether it's educate, bring prices down in the short term, anything, because he knows this could eat his lunch, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why you see his travel schedule. That's why you see him in Oklahoma around pipes. That's why you see him talking all the time about raising up domestic production of oil. People are like, Obama, he's not for drilling more. Yeah, he was. Over the last 3 years, we've increased production. Is that the solve of the problem? Maybe not, but he needs to be out there talking about it. Watch his travel schedule, see the states that he's in, talking about energy. He knows the same thing everybody around this table knows.
See you in Wetumpka. Gentlemen, we thank you very much for being with us.